It's your little impish WorldBox creator here again, and after last time, with all the clashing, I have questions. New questions. Namely, what does WorldBox look like in the future? What if we took all 4 civilizations all the way to the year 3000? Would it truly be like the Jonas Brothers said? Is my great-great-granddaughter doing fine? These are important questions, and I need to find out. The rules are going to be pretty similar to the last time around, but instead of every 100 or every 50 years adding a calamity, I will only be providing calamities every 500 years. That does mean, though, that the calamities are actually going to be bigger and more dangerous. So we're going to start things with a brand new world. Going to go with another massive iceberg. But this time around, things are going to be different. We're going to use the same border technique to block them all off. Okay, but this time, instead of splitting a bunch of different ways, I am instead just going to slice the map in half, and then we're going to slice it this way. Now we've got 4 sectors, roughly the same size, close enough for my uses. Now we're going to give them a lot of land. We'll give them 5 by 5 each, like so. Give them shallows on all sides. Another big difference is that we're going to have multiple biomes on every single island. So we're going to give them normal plains, give them a glacier biome, we're going to give them all a crystal biome, and then an enchanted forest on the outside. In the interior of each of these islands, I'm going to set up a small mountain range. And then inside that, I'm going to put a small jungle with a water geyser. To add a little bit of flair. Alright, now it's time for fertilizer. We're just going to hit everything everywhere with fertilizer. Then we do the same for trees. Big patches. A bunch of stones around the mountain. Fantastic. Alright, now we've got the base set up. Now we're going to add animals. Alright, chickens everywhere. Cows. Turtles. Crabs. I put a bear. Also put some sheep in the tundra. 3 monkeys in each jungle. Put some frogs in the enchanted forest. Some penguins in the tundra. Alrighty, that should be everything we need pretty much. Everything we need to start society is right here. Now we just add the people. Alright. So we've got islands with 7 of each type of humanoid on them. We've got all the biomes set up. We've got everything set to go. And now all we need to do is just turn up the time scale and let them develop. They quickly set to work and made their own villages. Some of them tried to make 2, some of them just all consolidated into 1. The humans completely fell apart in 10 years, so I have to put more humans in. There. Destroyed again. Okay, fine. You know what? Apparently humans just be weak. And in order for the experiment to work, they need to survive, so we're going to make more. We're going to set them up somewhere else that might not result in them being assaulted in 10 years. Okay. Now, we hope. So the humans just keep on infighting and then dying. I had to replant the humans 3 times. They couldn't handle the environment. So in the year 50, let's check on all our people. The humans have a population of roughly 80. They have mostly settled up in the north part of their island and broken up into 3 towns, but all under the same kingdom of Benson. Seems like they're still trying to fight off a lot of the local inhabitants, especially from the gem area, which seems to be their biggest issue considering how many times they had to be replanted. But they've already got themselves a pier, which is nice. The elves have managed to get a population just a hair over 200. They've managed to spread out to a couple of different areas and mostly have centralized around the jungle with their kingdom of Elaine. They've got themselves a windmill and 2 piers, so definitely doing pretty good for themselves. The orcs have spread out in all directions and taken over all 4 biomes with a town for each. They've got themselves 4 windmills and 2 piers. Really doing great on food over here. Very stable. I mean, they kind of have to with a population over 250. The dwarves, having finally settled after having 2 kingdoms for the longest period of time, now have 1 kingdom of O'Neill. and they have a pier and 2 windmills. With a population around 250, they're definitely going to need more food sources if they want to sustain. By the year 100, the humans had settled out 5 towns, each of them over 50 people, meaning their total population now is over 250. They've got a decent number of windmills scattered about, one for each town, as well as 2 upgraded ports and much larger ships. Granted, they can't go too far, but that does mean their technology is progressing. The elves have 4 cities, each roughly about 70 people in population or a bit more. This makes their population about 250 again, a little bit larger than the human population, but that also comes back with the fact that they have a mine, multiple windmills around their towns, and 2 upgraded ports. It also looks like they've made a statue to boats. The orcs have kept the 5 towns they had originally, kept the same windmill structure and upgraded their boat ports. It looks like they've been hampered a little bit by the positioning itself of some of their windmills. Their population is still resting right around 250 as well. That seems to be the equilibrium we're currently at. The dwarves have a singular port and a windmill for each of their towns, but their population is still resting around 280. Shockingly, I don't see any mines here, which is honestly a big shock considering they're dwarves. Considering all this and the level of equilibrium we're currently at, we're going to let things rock and roll for a little while. Checking in the year 250, populations have started to grow again. We've got most of the islands now over 300. The human settlement has their 5 towns. They've still got the same port set up, but they do seem to be pretty stable overall, if nothing else. They still have yet to set up a single mine, however, we're starting to see more of the basic statues set up around at each town. This one's very cool. Elf population has settled down into 4 towns, with a population well over 400. They've managed to settle in, they've got the same port set up still, but there's a couple different stylings of houses now, and they've got themselves a mine in the upper right corner, as well as in the middle. The orcs have stuck with their 5 towns, with a population just peaking over 400. They've got a decent number of mines set up, and their boats seem pretty basic still. The dwarves, however, have got a population approaching 450 between their 5 towns. They've got themselves a couple of mines set up, and they've started adding new, larger monuments to their towns. Surprisingly, the dwarves have been the first ones to really upgrade their piers, and they now have a multitude of them set up. Now we're going to accelerate to the year 500, the first calamity. In the year 414, some of the dwarves staged a revolt and actually broke off into a schism kingdom of Isham. They then proceeded to go to war against O'Neill, their father kingdom, and immediately lost Thorbar in the year 416, followed by their capital, Isham, in the year 417. But they inspired another revolt. When Isham became the new capital, the northern towns did not like that so much, so the towns of Omaril and Odahur immediately revolted in the year 419 and established their own kingdom with a capital at Omaril. They then repeated the same mistake and went to war against their father kingdom. But where their predecessors failed, they won and took the former capital of O'Neill. Thorbor was then retaken in the year 424. It was retaken again in the year 426 by the north. I think everybody knows where this goes from here. O'Neill fell again in the year 433. Thorbor taken back in the year 435. Odahir was taken sneakily from the north in the year 436. Odahir was taken back yet again in 439 by the north. And then in the year 441, a new alliance between the 2 kingdoms was founded. The Dragon Enclave. Unlike their predecessors, the North actually managed to properly schism and hold their own against the older kingdom. So, checking in the year 500, the first thing that I noticed was that the humans, elves, and orcs island biomes had been completely overturned. What was originally a 1/4 clean split between 4 different biomes was now almost entirely dominated by basic plains biome. Very few pockets of the original biomes seem to be clinging on in most of the corners, but beyond that, almost everything had turned a clean green. I don't know whether that's good or bad for the societies, we'll have to just wait and see. However, on the Dwarves Island, there seemed to be more of a muddled split. While most of the lines were still pretty much gone, the mineral biome seemed to actually be creeping into the plains biome and was holding on a lot better than most of the others. Now, checking in on the societies, the humans have managed a population a little bit over 750 between 5 settlements. They've managed to get much larger houses, and I'm even starting to see the turnouts of new buildings like lookout towers, an increase in the number of monuments, as well as a golden monument right in the center. I also managed to spot what looked like a fort in one of the towns, and while they still only have the 2 piers, they seem to be going strong, with lots of boats around them. The elves have managed a population over 800 split between 4 different towns, all based under the same kingdom of Elaine. We're seeing a little bit less diversity in the housing, however, there were a couple of buildings I noticed that seemed pretty unique. There was this interesting ring building near the center. There was a shrine built to a red tree, and a couple more of these buildings with swords on top of them had popped up around the place. The orcs seem to have advanced a little bit, however, it's kinda hard to judge. They seem to have built a bunch of death domes. I have no idea what the purpose for this type of building would be. There's a little bit more variety in their housing structure, and not only are we seeing a shrine to some kind of volcanic lava god, but they've also gotten themselves some statues, as well as what looks to be some lookout towers. They've managed to expand their piers out to 5 different piers, and they seem to have a decent fleet of boats along with them. The dwarves, after the schism, have still managed to get a population of 720, and they have managed to turn almost the entire island into living space. There's a lot less variety in the structures being placed here. However, I'm going to attribute that a little bit to the fact that they got stone exceptionally late, considering their backbone is stone. I also think the war may have limited their ability to expand quite a bit. Alright, but it's the year 500, which means that all of these places are about to see an absolute travesty. And this time around, I think we're going to be giving them some earthquakes. Each island is going to be struck with 3 earthquakes. This will dramatically alter the environment on each island, and hopefully lead to some better advancements from these societies. An interesting split we got. One almost entirely mountain, one half mountain, half underground, one that ended up honestly pretty flat with all things considered, and then one that's got a huge hole in it. Alright, with that, we're gonna see how they react. Seems like a bunch of orcs got stuck in the mountain ranges. Interestingly enough, there is one path through the range, though. I wonder how that's going to change things over time. Checking in on things in the year 750, the human population has grown just a hair below 1100. They've gotten themselves a couple of these very fancy, very nice little statue fountains with a little gold figurine on top. Very cute. They've built up a decent standing army and have a bunch more statues littered around of the smaller variety as well. Seems to be mostly dragons. Over on the Elven Island, not much has really changed. They've gotten a little bit larger population-wise and are now standing a little bit over 900 individuals, but they have yet to breach 1,000. The orcs are in a similar position at only 950 individuals. A few of them did get stuck in the mountains, and there still is one who's managed to stay there the entire time. They've gotten a few more of these monuments littered around now, but beyond that, they're just kind of trucking on. The dwarves have definitely done the best for themselves. They now have a standing population of nearing 1,200. They've got a decent-sized army. They've started building these little forts, which seems very cool, and their city halls are looking extravagant. But with that, we're off to year 1000. The next calamity. Alright, checking in everywhere in the year 1000. Let's actually start with the last civilization and go back to the first. The dwarves have reached a population of 1,400. Everything's looking a lot more golden around here. A bunch of larger houses have sprung up, but beyond that, everything seems to be at equilibrium. The orcs population is finally eked out over 1,000. They're getting some very gnarly structures in here, and most of the other biomes have completely collapsed. Besides a couple of grass patches here or there, everything is plains. Same with the elves. The elves' entire biome has been overgrown with plains, with very few exceptions. Interestingly enough, a desert started to form in the center where the earthquake took place. However, the elves' population still has yet to reach over 1,000. The humans' population has actually fallen, so far now that they are barely over 1,000. Their biome's still pretty mixed up, and they've managed to get more of these little golden statues, the relevance of which I have yet to figure out. But now that we're in year 1,000, it's time for a calamity to strike. And considering the land limitations, I'm going to give all of them an opportunity to get more land. So, introducing a little island. Every single one of these slices has their own little island. They're all about the same surface area for land. However, I'm not going to give that to them for free. Instead, this is going to sprout out of the ground with a bunch of cyber cores. This means they're going to have to fight for this land. There we go. Now they'll start pumping out units, and even fighting back in some instances. We'll leave them to their devices for another 500 years and check in later on. So, checking in the year 1250. The human population is still about stable. They have yet to destroy a single cyber core, putting them at a significant disadvantage against everybody else. The elven population is just over 1,000, and they've managed to take out 4 of the 10 cores on their island. The orcs population is just a little under 1,000, but they've still managed to take out 3 of the 10 cores and are slowly pushing inward. And the dwarves are doing the best. With a population approaching 1,500, they have relentlessly attacked this land and managed to take out 6 of the 10 cores, meaning that they're over halfway done. We're gonna let things roll for another 250 years. So we're checking in the year 1500. The humans are still sitting at just about 1,000 population. Definitely more variety in their housings. It's looking very nice, actually. Very classy. They've got a good standing army. They've managed to work well around the mountain range that just popped up out of nowhere in the year 500, and they're well on their way to a functional society. However, they still have yet to take out a single power core, meaning that this entire island is fairly dangerous for them. The elves have a population just a hair over 1,000, and they've managed to distribute pretty well, but they're not utilizing a lot of the space here. Very similarly to the humans, they have lost most of the other biomes on their land, besides the new desert that popped up in the middle. Unlike the humans, they have managed to take out over half of the cores on the extra piece of land that they could claim, and they've even tried to settle here multiple times. Every time it gets destroyed, but it's a sign of progress. The orcs have a population well in excess of 1,000, and have a decent amount of variety in their builds. They've managed to get around this mountain issue simply by just walking through the tiny path in the middle, but overall, they haven't been severely impacted by much. They have not had as good of a conquest against the cores. They've only taken out 3 of the 10, but they're still better off than the humans. Now, the dwarves. Honestly, at this point, favored to be the victors of this kind of competition. With a population well in excess of 1,500 on this little slab, they have definitely utilized the space the most. They have beautiful housing structures, roads all over the place, a good backbone for their food. A couple of the biomes have managed to sustain over to this time frame, which is just phenomenal for them, and good standing armies that are quick to respond. Considering all of this, it's not a surprise that there are only 2 cores left on the island that haven't been wiped out, which puts them closest for actually seeing victory here. Now, we're halfway through the designated time zone, so with that in mind, we're going to bring up a little something unique here. I'm actually going to add multiple adjustments right now. First thing we're going to do is that in the center of every single one of these islands, I want there to be a bigger hole. So we're just going to give them a little kablamo. Oh no. Well, that was a mistake, but I'm going to own it. Kablamo. Can't undo it, so we're just going to give them all a little strike. They'll be fine. In exchange for this, we're going to give them something that's a little bit more beneficial. In the center of each of the craters, we are going to plant ourselves nice water geyser. But it will help put out the fires, and it'll fill in any lower elevation gaps with clean water. Now, the other adjustments we're going to make right here is we're going to take soil, and each of these is going to be land bridged. Now, these regions are going to have to be taken over, or they're going to push against the mainland. And with that, we're going to leave things to run for another 250 years. By the year 1550, something interesting had happened. Obviously, the dwarves had started moving in on the new territory. Not a shocker there, they had the least work to be done once the land bridge was added in. But the elves were still fighting the exact same number of towers. The orcs had managed to push through a little bit further, but they still had some towers to go. But the humans, The humans had completely taken out every single tower in front of them, and they began populating in extreme the new territory, before the grass even had time to grow on it. This might be a turning point for these lucky little guys. Checking in the year 1750, the humans have completely settled all of the land, and the grass has grown over everything. There's a definitive population boom that has brought them up by over 200 from the last check-in. Very stable. Actually, the environments here have intermingled a lot more, and the mineral biome has been pushing more towards the center of the world. But overall, they've managed to get by away from the radiation and all the other problems just fine, rebuilding even stronger than they were. The elves just recently took the land. It took them the second longest to actually manage to push back all the cyber cores, even though they had a significant advantage over the humans when the land bridge was built. I guess that's just how they are. They have yet to even put in roads, but they are definitely seeing a smaller population boom, and their numbers have stabilized across the entirety of the land. They do not have nearly as many biomes left. Honestly, the only thing they really have left is a couple patches of snow here or there. Otherwise, things have smoothed out over here for them, but it won't be like that for long. The orcs have managed to not only rebuild, but get another city built up on the right side here. They've got a very good population size, over 1,000. But they have yet to take any of the remaining land because there's still 2 cores that are hanging on, and they are not fielding enough forces to actually get through them. The dwarves, interestingly enough, while their mainland has been growing at a consistent rate, and they still boast the largest population of all of the societies, they have yet to actually settle the land. They've let everything grow over, it looks all nice and clean, but they haven't settled it a bit yet. Instead, on the mainland, most of the biomes have started intermingling so completely that it's hard to tell where anything starts or ends, and some of the snow is even starting to make its way across the land bridge towards that new plot of land. I'm contemplating maybe giving them a blessing in the year 2000 instead of a travesty, but only time will tell on that. Let's let things roll for a little while and see how it goes. Alrighty, let's check over everything in the year 2000 before Y2K takes place. So, the humans have definitely developed. Almost the entire island now has been completely civilized. There's roads everywhere, windmills, watchtowers, and piers all over the place. They have many fancy little statues. On their island, they have managed to get a nice sized population, and their overall population now is approaching 1,500. One of the largest population sizes that we currently have on this world. Now, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a dramatic improvement over where they were previously. The elves, on the other hand, are still sticking to their 4 cities on the mainland. They have gotten pretty far. It doesn't look like they're big fans of roads, period, and most of their houses are coming up to be one of 2 designs. Pretty straightforward around these parts. Definitely doing good for themselves, and they have managed to civilize the entire island now. It looks nice and cleaned up. They've got it covered with nice little dotted houses all over the place, a mine, a windmill, very nice for them. And they have a decently sized standing army. They've managed to bring their population back up, and they're coming on the cusp of 1,300 now. So not too shabby for them. They definitely made more use of this island with their double village plan. The orcs have 5 cities, and while they've managed to get around the issues of the mountains, they still have yet to take over the new land, which means they have not seen any kind of major population boom. They're still sitting around 1,200, which is still a respectable number, but it is the lowest number on the map. Likewise, a lot of their buildings have kind of slowed down. We're not seeing too much more variety at this point. However, they do still have a standing army, regardless of how many they slam into the northeast corner. The dwarves, again, the best favored group, actually are right on par with the humans. They have a population of roughly 1,500. Their biome is pretty well split up still, and they have yet to actually civilize anything on the new land, which means once they do that, they might end up having another population explosion. But regardless, it's amazing to see that both sides of their societies, both kingdoms, are still in perfect peace and have not had a single conflict in over 1,000 years. So, considering the fact that we're in the year 2000, and there's only 1,000 more years to go, I feel like they're deserving of both a blessing and a curse. So let's go with the curse first. 1, 2, 3. Out of these water geysers, 3 dragons are going to erupt. And if they can handle them, they can handle them. If they can't, then it's going to be a bad time for them. But in exchange for all of that hardship, I'm going to give them a gift. Now, this may just appear like it's new land, but what I'm actually going to be doing here is giving them brand new biomes. Biomes that they've never seen before and never had the opportunity to harvest resources from. This is going to add a lot of diversity to what they're going to be able to produce, which means that life for every individual might get a little bit better overall. And since they're isolated, we don't need to worry about this infecting other biomes. So every single one is going to get some candy, some lemon, and some infernal. And then we're just going to hit it all with some fertilizer, so that these new islands are worth something to them. And with that, off the great traders go. We'll check back again in another quarter eon. Finally, by 2030, the orcs had caught up and beaten out the computer cores that everybody else had beaten over 500 years ago. And they started settling the new land, along with the islands. So around 2080, something interesting happened. The peaceful human society that had existed for so long, half of them staged a revolt, and it spread quickly. And by the year 2095, everything in human civilization had fallen under the kingdom of Denago's grasp. I guess long live the king. So, checking in the year 2250, another rebellion has taken place in human society and has actually washed over 4 towns at this point. The war still rages, but things don't look too hot. Considering how quickly this has been spreading, I don't think it's going to hold out for much longer. Over on the elf side, they've managed to get a decent population boom off of each of the islands. They haven't done much on their mainland, but I don't expect them to at this point, honestly. They have managed to up their numbers just slightly on the secondary island, but not too much. The orcs have grown. Not much, but a bit. They've completely settled out the new land on the island, as well as managed to get all 3 of the islands settled with exactly 70 people. I don't know what they're doing over there, but their math seems to be good. The dwarves not only have increased their numbers even more on the mainland, they have yet to bother with settling this big slice of land I set up for them, but sure, they'll take these little setups here. Confusing, but they're the bosses. We have made it all the way to the year 2500. The humans have completely settled out again, and everybody's happily in one kingdom under the state of Denago. With a population over 1600, they've managed to settle out most of the new land and are doing a great job. The elves are a little bit smaller with a population of 1500, but they have managed to settle out all of the exterior islands, and they've still got a pretty decent balance of population on each and every one of them. The secondary island definitely has the most population on it, and they've used the most space there. But they still have a lot of spare space left over, honestly, on the main source of land. At this point, I doubt they're going to use it, but it's still interesting to see. The orcs have finally caught up. Their population is just a hair over 1600. It's honestly amazing to see how quickly they managed to once they had all of the land settled, but I'm very proud of them, really being the underdog here. And the dwarves. The dwarves, while not settling anything on the secondary space, and having settled all 3 of these small islands, they are still in the lead for the largest population. At over 1700, these guys are doing the best for themselves. Quite strange considering the fact that it took them some of the longest to develop, and they still have yet to really surpass any of the other societies with building designs or anything like that, but they are the biggest. Now, this is the last major calamity before we hit the year 3000. And in the year 3000, I think a couple of people can guess what I'm planning on doing. But this time around, I'm going to make things difficult but not impossible. Each society is getting 5 UFOs. Now, these can fly anywhere, so they might choose to go somewhere else and might choose to specifically mess up one society more than another. But every single one is getting 5 UFOs in the corner near the center here. And then we're gonna let time fly and see how it goes. The final calamity will be in 3000, and that's gonna be a multi-parter. But for now, let's just see how they handle this. By the year 2600, a decent revolt had actually taken place inside the elven population. The first one to ever happen. They managed to take over all 3 of the outlying islands, as well as the entire mainland under the kingdom of Edatora. The only remaining vestige of the original kingdom is out on the second island. Alad and Onidi are the only 2 towns that are staying loyal to the original ways. So, our last check-in in the year 2750, before we finally reach the year 3000. The humans are doing great. Everything's solid with them, they just keep on trucking. They haven't had any revolts, any problems. They're just chilling. The elves, on the other hand, have now reached a stalemate. I think there's a treaty in place between Editora and Alad. The old society has been relegated to a small island, and the rest of the revolutionaries have taken over everything besides that. But their numbers are pretty stable overall, and it wasn't significantly impacted by the conflict. The orcs are still one happy family, chilling out, not really bothering with much. They've managed to get a little bit further along, but overall their numbers have reached full stability. The dwarves are still the easy winners of this competition at this point. They haven't had any major conflicts. Besides that one revolt that happened early on, peace has maintained all the way through. The original cities and the original kingdoms are still in play. They have even had a major upgrade. They managed to put one single lookout tower on the whole plot of new land that they have never once used besides this. They just sent their boats around it and they haven't bothered touching it otherwise. Curious, but I guess that's their path to success. Just a little bit more time and we'll be in the year 3000. Having finally gotten to the year 3000, I'm disappointed. I was expecting planes, trains, and automobiles. But I think I have some ways to fix this. Not much has changed, though they live underwater. And your great-great-great-granddaughter is doing fine.